What's up, COD fans? Welcome back. IHOLDSHIFT, you're you. This is the CWL recap from week 4, day number 1. And what an interesting day it was. Let's take a look back just really briefly as we go through at what the divisional standings looked like before we got into today. Of course, you see Splyce Heretics still flawless when it came down to what they did in their first week of Division B play. This would be, again, an opportunity for Splyce to start off as they would play 4 games this week. Heretics would play 3. Envy accelerate all of that game, sitting around 1-2, 1-3, 100 Thieves as well. A lot of room to move around in the middle portion, the 4 through 6 spots. So we'll take a look to see exactly what happened as we look into our schedule. And of course, we dig into the games today. It would start off with Team Envy taking on 100 Thieves. And at the beginning of this broadcast, I was pretty confident that Team Envy would be able to come back, correct their mistakes, and come out relatively on fire. That was the idea, at least. Of course, they wouldn't have the best first week ever, having that 2-3 loss to accelerate to start off their week. They would bounce back and take Splyce to 5, and then they would take care of Denial in 4 rather convincing games. But in this one versus 100 Thieves, you know, my biggest thing with 100 Thieves is this, before we dig into the scores. 100 Thieves, I think the Octane Slasher and Priestess trio is very, very solid. Probably one of the better trios when it comes to AR to SMG gameplay in the game at the moment. The biggest problem has been Kenny and Enable, and they really needed Kenny and Enable to step up if they want to try to take down opponents that I personally think are just generally better than them. Today, that would actually pretty much happen. Kenny played better, Enable played better, and Envy looked a little bit soft on certain points. Now, this one would go 4 games, and the first hard point was very, very close. Envy would take 100 Thieves to Arsenal, which is a map that they have not done well on whatsoever. 100 Thieves would be down 100 points at one point in time, but would make the comeback. And they would come out on top 250 to 236, and then from there it was a little bit more one-sided each direction. With the exception of the final hard point, as you see it, it would be Envy losing it at 250 to 206. And my biggest thing was just at the end of the game, Kenny started to play better, and Apathy really started to struggle. That's kind of my two things with these two teams in specific. For 100 Thieves, it's can Enable and can Kenny start to come forward and start playing better. For Envy, it really kind of feels like, will it be Assault and, more importantly, Apathy to stay consistent? Assault with an ICR is absolutely insane. His Maddox gameplay is okay. It's not the best, it's not the worst, it's just kind of right in where I would say league average would be. But Apathy is one of those things, you know, especially playing on the SOG, you need to be able to help out Huke. You need to be able to have someone else there that can be in the same kind of aggressive fragging style that Huke has had to do previously to carry teams, and that seems to be kind of the case here. It's kind of mostly been Hook, Silly, and Aches that have really been the solid trio for Envy. And today it would be 100 Thieves that would inch this one out. But it was a good set. It just was interesting to see kind of when one of those duos that, you know, we look for playing better actually does play better. And then when the other one doesn't, how things can kind of swing. So 100 Thieves, they'll improve to 2-2. That's a nice win under their belt to start their week off. Coming up for them to finish things off, they have Accelerate, they've got Heretics, and they got E6, so kind of in the middle of the week for them. And for Envy, they've still got E6, E United, and Heretics. Not exactly the easiest road ever. And then we've got Splyce and Accelerate, speaking of, and for a lot of people, Splyce should have came out, and you would have probably assumed that they would 3-0 this team, no problem. I am, you know, more of the betting guy. I bet the spread on this, the 2-round spread differential between these two teams, that would occur. Splyce took care of Accelerate with really not much problems whatsoever, with the exception of the Search and Destroy, where Splyce looked a little disjointed at times. This one was pretty straightforward, though. 250 to 149, a 6-4 on that Search and Destroy, a pretty solid and easy 3-0 for the control, and then the 250, 194. But here's my thing about Splyce, before we go too far away from this, is they were in a 100-plus point range for both of those hard points a number of times, and they let Accelerate get back into the game later in the stages, around the second, like near the end of the second rotation to hard points. Accelerate started to piece together a couple of rotations, and the biggest thing for me is you cannot do that if you're Splyce, and you could kind of see at different points, different Splyce players kind of looking at each other like, why are we letting teams get back into these games near the end of that one? It was a comfortable win, but again, they've got a pretty difficult lineup for coming up this week. They've got Heretics tomorrow, then they've got an easy game versus Denial, you would assume, and then they've got E United. They've got the two best teams to play in the division, so you cannot let those things go if you're Splyce. You have to clean things up and be ready to go. Speaking of, let's take a look at Tuesday. This is our games that we have set up for us coming tomorrow. It'll start off with E United taking on Denial, 100 Thieves versus Accelerate Gaming, Heretics and Splyce, the one that everyone's got their eyes on. And don't sleep on this Envy and Enigma 6 game. We'll talk about each of these as we go. So taking a look at E United and Denial. Both of these teams are at opposite points of the divisional spectrum. Let's be honest. There's no reason that you would expect Denial to take even a map off of E United. You take a look at the side-by-sides. E United is a plus 53 differential in their hardpoint averages, where Denial is minus 65. That's the biggest disparity between these two teams, is the hardpoint. 5-2 is the United, 1-6 is Denial, and they have not looked great on hardpoint yet. If you're Denial and you want to take a game potentially off of the United, you need to clean up your specialist gameplay. You need to be able to maneuver around the map together as a unit, because there's no way that you're going to be able to win out face-up gunfights individually against the members of E United. RCDs is looking like one of the best ICRs in the game. Clayster's flex parole has been insane, not just from him picking up an ICR, but obviously mostly using the Maddox, but he's also been Sogster a couple different times. When he plays on maps like Frequency, he'll pick up the Sog, and he does well with it. So if you're Denial, you need to find a way to try to mimic that performance. You know, I'm looking at Natche, who's not really performed yet when it comes to the Pro League at the moment. He needs to step up for sure. Whalers and Zeke need to do a good job, and Risk has to be the solid performer that he has been as of now. So this one, prediction-wise, I've got this one going 3-0 United's direction. For the next game up, we've got 100 Thieves and Accelerate. And, you know, now that I look at it a little bit more closely, this is not a match to sleep on really at all either. It just kind of comes down to, will Robbie B be able to help them out in the hard point specifically as you take a look at both of these teams side by side. It's been the hard point that Accelerate has really struggled with. They're actually the worst team in the Pro League at hard point at a minus 72, almost a minus 73 point differential per map on average when it comes to hard point, sitting at just 1-6. In 100 Thieves, you know, I liked the way that they looked playing up against Team Envy on Search specifically. That 6-2 was very convincing. That was something that I was looking forward to, as they were only 1-3 in Search before that set. They've helped their averages out, and they were doing okay, but they weren't able to close out maps. So the fact that they were able to take this at a convincing 6-2, not let Envy come back into it, it makes me feel good about their Search. Accelerate's been very meh in their Search, to be honest, very right down the middle. And the big thing just comes down to, can 100 Thieves clean up their control? They've been a very hit or miss team when it comes to control so far. That's the one that needs to go. I still have 100 Thieves taking this one. I think it'll be a 3-1 scoreline when things are all said and done. And then we go to the money match. Heretics Splyce. Honestly, flip a coin. This is going to be a really good match, I believe. I think Heretics has had a more demanding schedule, so as you take a look at some of these numbers as they pop up, they will kind of obviously favor that of Splyce at first glance. But like we mentioned, Splyce still has to play Heretics as well as they have to play E United. So, and for Heretics, they've played everybody good so far. They've played E United, they've played Enigma 6, who's looking solid. The only other player, the team that they have to play is Envy, and maybe even 100 Thieves if they're able to do something against Heretics. But for me, it's been a harder schedule so far for that of Heretics. So as you take a look at these two teams, both of them flawless at 4-0. 6-1 is the hard point for Splyce, and they're at a plus 35 differential. That's a very notable one, where Heretics has only been 4-3. But then you look down the line, the Search and Destroy, it's pretty much the same storyline, but it favors that of Heretics. Now, Splyce hasn't been bad. They're 3-2. They're very solid, but the problem about it is they let up a lot more rounds than Heretics do when it comes to Search. All of their Search games have been a lot closer than Heretics have, which is a really impressive stat line. And then when it comes down to Control, you give a slight favor to Splyce on how they've played Control so far, and honestly, I do think that they are the stronger Control team, based on all their setups they have, plus their ability to set up not only proper rotations, but also bait and switches, not as just individuals, but as a full team, kind of flanking one way and then backing up and going to the other point. They're looking really good on offense specifically, and that's been one of the things that Heretics has struggled on more than Splyce has. So for that reason, I see this one going a full 5 games. I see them splitting hard points and splitting searches, but at the end of the day, it's going to come down to the Control, and I think the Control will favor that of Splyce. So I have this going either a 3-2 with Splyce taking the last search, or it's going 3-1. It really, for me, just comes down to who gets the first search pick, or if Splyce potentially can take both hard points. I still think this set vastly favors Splyce because they do have the Control in their favor. I would say not definitively, like drastically definitively, but it is a slight edge in that department going the way of Splyce. So I've got Splyce taking this one for those reasons below. And then Enigma 6 and Team Envy. And yes, both teams are 1 and 3 with very similar map counts. But as we take a look at this a little bit more in detail, this is going to be a very close matchup for a lot of reasons. Now, again, on paper, Team Envy seems to have the better stat line, but you take a look at what Enigma 6 has played so far. They've played EU, they've played Heretics, and they've played Splyce. This is the week where I think that these guys bounce back. Now, the question becomes, can they do it against Envy? It's very realistically possible, but this is going to be likely a very close game. You take a look at the hard point, a 3-4 versus the 4-4 Enigma 6 versus Envy in this head-to-head matchup. The search and destroy is the biggest thing for Enigma 6. My biggest question mark comes down to the search. Everything else is pretty much even across the board. It's just the search. They're 1-4, and they have not looked great, especially later on in their sets. Those search scores specifically, in the middle portion of their last week, there were 2 1-6s, and 1-2-6 before they would take Splyce to round 11. They wouldn't be able to take either hardpoint from Splyce. So for me, it just comes down to, can they actually get their reins in hand when it comes to their search gameplay? It seems like when they're able to control space up close and personal with the SOGs, that's where they love to be. And honestly, that's the mismatch they need to try to exploit as much as possible if you want to win. It just comes down to, will the Maddox and AR line be able to match up against that of Envy's? I personally do not think that they will. It's a close one. I almost went with E6 in my predictions for the COD Gamepedia stuff, but I'm going to stick with Team Envy on this one. It's going to be a close game, though. I have this one going a full 5 games. I have it going 3-2, favoring that of Envy. So that's been the breakdown for you guys as far as after day number 1. We'll be back with day number 2's recap after the games tomorrow, so I hope you guys come back and check it out. Make sure you hit that subscribe button, ring the bell for notifications when these videos do pop up, and of course, keep your eyes on some maps that you guys want to see broken down, because I decided that I will be actually doing a one specific map breakdown between the two teams that are playing it and kind of take isolated incidents from each as far as why things are good, why things are bad. If that doesn't feel good, I'll probably just take that same set, take snippets of it, and do one team's perspective throughout the entirety of the set. But at the moment, I'm leaning towards doing just one map from a single match and breaking that one down with a fun little graphics and little movement stuff and all the breakdown things you'd want to see. So if you'd rather see just one team's perspective, though, you know, for an entire set, things they do well throughout and why this team's doing well, feel free to leave me down to comment below if you want to see that, because I'm kind of leaning towards one or the other, but I'm not 100% sold on it yet. So if you want to get your input in for that, go ahead and do it. I'm going to stop talking, let you guys enjoy the rest of your day. Until next time, hope you keep holding it down. Later. Bye-bye.